Hey everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm Colton. Today we're talking about mental health in photography because I don't think this gets talked about enough. I think all too often we get into this sort of culture of we have to grind on this particular skill set, and you've got to be taking photos all the time and pushing yourself and tackling challenges. And I think that's all great. But I think we also have to acknowledge that, like anything, we need rest. We need to recuperate. We need to enjoy the work that we've put in. We need to take a step back sometimes and decide if we're being too harsh on ourselves or if we are judging ourselves by metrics that are reasonable. And I want to share a specific story. Of course, this is just one part of a massive discussion that can and should be had. But it's a story that kind of stood out to me. And it's about a photographer who is still with us, so don't worry about that. But it's someone who I used to shoot with a little bit, got to know, learned a good bit from, and we've just kind of drifted apart, I guess. I haven't talked to him in a long time, but I am still impacted by a lot of the conversations that we had. And at the time, I was really trying to push my photography. I was trying to get better at photography on the creative side. I was pushing myself to make a lot of money doing photography while also still being super creative and really establishing what that creative voice could be. I was pushing myself in terms of getting beyond just taking the photo. What happens to showcase the photo or to get it out into the world? And one method I was using was Instagram. Now, Instagram then was a lot different than Instagram now. It was very photo-centric, and you could post photos, artists were on there, and you could share ideas, you could reach large audiences. It's not as much like today where it's mostly a few people that you follow and then lots of ads and lots of suggested videos filling up your feed and burying the stuff that you're actually interested in. But at the time I was trying to grow this account, and there were successes and there were stresses and there were failures in regards to that. And I met this photographer, and we shot a few times, but one specific time I got like a studio tour. And this was really eye-opening to me because this photographer mostly dealt in very creative still lives. So set up a whole studio, some sort of background, a subject, the lighting, the camera, all of that stuff. And, that whole process of taking a photo and the click of that shutter was really just the beginning of this particular picture. For a lot of us, that's the end. We took the photo, we're done. But for him, it was really just the beginning. He would develop that film. He'd shoot mostly on medium format film. He'd develop it himself. He'd scan it in. He'd take a look at it, find out what photos he wanted to actually keep and work with. And then he would send that off to some sort of lab or business. This is the part where it being a few years ago, my brain starts to get a little fuzzy on the details, but he would send it off, and essentially they had a process by which they would convert this negative to a positive and back and forth a few times physically as they expanded the size of it to be really, really large. And what they were ultimately trying to create was a massive, like, metal framed screen printable negative that could be used to essentially screen print the image onto a massive canvas picture. And while they were doing all of that, he would go out, buy up all the lumber, the hardware, the canvas, everything he needed. He would build his own frame, measure, cut, do all that stuff, stretch the canvas onto the frame, and this thing was huge. And then once he had that ready and he got the massive negative back, he'd lay it on top, he'd get ink, and he would hand spread the ink onto this screen print, which would then put it onto the canvas. And no two were ever the same. Not that he really made multiples of any of these, but if he did, they all came out a little different because different amounts of ink, different way that he spread it, how much pressure he applied. So no two were ever the same, which was also an added benefit for him. And then he would do things like maybe sprinkle something on there to make it diamond encrusted looking, or he might add some method by which he could put texture to this large canvas. And then once the image was on there in whatever way he wanted it to be, he would then build an outside frame for the canvas to really make it look professional and, gallery ready. And that was really important because he was hanging these in a gallery. He had them in a few different galleries. There was one nearby where he lived that we went and visited, and he had his art up on the gallery wall. And he was selling that art, at least the ones I saw in that particular moment. And man, he was selling these for thousands of dollars. I remember walking in and seeing the first one was $3,600 and thinking, man, I've been trying to sell mine for like 25 bucks. He's selling them for $3,600. So he would do all these other things too, solo exhibitions in different galleries. He'd have his work hanging all over the place. So very successful photographer, shooting creatively, not being paid necessarily to do it, shooting creatively, custom building the entire thing. Not really sending much off for other people to do, doing it all himself, hanging it, and then having people pay thousands and thousands of dollars to buy it. And so by all means, definitely successful from that creative standpoint. But then he also had an Instagram account, right? You got to promote yourself. You got to put your work out there in the digital world so that you can have that reflected in the physical world by people going to your gallery showings or buying your work. And he would do all sorts of things. Digital, copies that he had scanned in, he might share those. He might take behind the scenes photos of him building these different canvas, pictures, or taking the photo, or being at an exhibition, whatever it may be. And he'd post them on Instagram. Great promotional tools, really great content. And he, at best, might get 26 likes. At worst, he'd get 5, 9 likes, no comments on a really great post. And this was really interesting to me because at the time I was really trying to grow my Instagram account. I had a goal of a certain number of followers by the end of that year. I wanted to do a certain amount of work. I wanted to cultivate a certain image online for that work. And so to see someone who was killing it in selling work for thousands of dollars, being in a gallery, really having a great process for how they're taking and putting their work out there, to see them so successful there and so utterly unsuccessful, at least by the metric of how many likes and comments and engagements that you might get on Instagram, to see that disparity in difference between those two was really, really shocking. And it just kind of goes to show that sometimes those things mean nothing, but those are also the same sorts of things that we can get hung up about. And we can be taking great photographs, producing wonderful, wonderful work, and then not seeing the benefit that we think we should see or that we deserve to see. You see people post photos on Instagram that are amazing and they get a lot of likes. You see people that post photos on Instagram that are amazing and get next to no likes. You see people that post stuff on Instagram that, my personal opinion, is absolutely terrible and get tons and tons of likes. So there's all sorts of variations of this. And if you're just looking at Instagram alone, and I am picking on Instagram a lot in this video, but that's just because it fits into this example really well. But if that was your one metric, you could get very upset by that. You could be burned out. I'm putting in all this work. I'm producing It's time consuming, it's expensive, and I'm getting no attention for it. I'm depressed. My self-worth is tanking because I thought these were great images and they're not. And so what am I? Am I not even a good photographer? So I think it's important, especially as years change and we're talking about projects that we want to work on that will be time consuming, that could be expensive, that could take a lot of emotional energy to see it through and to tackle a challenge and produce an image we're really proud of. It's important to recognize that we also need to give ourselves the ability to step back and judge if what we are putting importance on is really something that's that important, but also to listen to our mind, to listen to our body, and to rest when we need to rest. To take a step back and say, I'm not going to shoot with this camera. I'm not going to take on this project because I have these other projects going on, or because I just finished the project and I need time to recuperate before I take on the next one. I don't want to burn out. I don't want to get depressed. I don't want my self-worth to tank. And I think this is an important subject really for anything creative, but especially in photography too. And so that's been the point of this video, is to simply introduce that and talk about it and start that conversation for folks who haven't started it, or continue that conversation for folks who have already begun. But I would love to hear what your tips and tricks are for other photographers that you have found helpful in maintaining your sanity as you embark on these creative projects, these different photographic challenges and whatever that you are interacting with. How do you keep your sanity in those moments, and what steps do you take? Also, if you found this interesting, if it resonated with you at all, do give me a thumbs up. And if you want to see more content like this, if you want to join me on my creative journey in photography, hit the subscribe button, ring the bell. That'll keep you in the know for when the next video drops. I hope you have a wonderful year. I hope your projects work out, you learn a lot, and I hope you also get rest that you need, maintain your sanity, and overall have a positive experience as a photographer and as a creative. For now, I'm Colton. I'll see you in the next one.